Final community, Jam fans, random people on the internet. My name is Giggens. I don't know. And we're here today to talk about the Jam, the Sound Effects album from 1980. One of my favorite albums by the Jam. Paul Weller has actually said that he thinks this might be one of the Jam's best albums too. I would agree with that. One vibe he was going for on this album was to make something that sounded like Revolver meets Off the Wall by Michael Jackson. Very interesting sort of blending of ideas. I would say there's a tiny bit of the off the wall influence maybe in the drumming, but the Revolver influence is almost suable. I mean, it's everywhere. I mean, the song Start is basically Taxman. We'll get into that. So basically, if you don't know the Jam, they were around in the late 70s, early 80s, and then Paul Weller broke up the Jam and did the Style Council for most of the 80s, and then ended that, and then went off and has done a solo thing for about the last 25 years or so. But the Jam were never a punk band, they were never a rock band, they were kind of like their own thing. They're very much like what Ted Leo would be these days, in that aesthetic, that, you know, they were really like literate and wordy, but their music was very, I don't know if you could use the word alternative. They were lumped into the punk crowd, but they weren't really punk. They were like a mod revival, but they had their own flavor of that going on. Kind of hard to describe their sound in a conventional sense of throwing them into a genre and having it be easy. One of those things where you're like, if you were a fan of The Clash, or a fan of, I guess if you were a fan of punk, maybe you would like The Clash. I mean, the Jam. But I feel like the people who were, you know, kind of born just past the 60s and grew up in the 70s and wanted to experience the mod stuff of the, you know, mid-60s period, but in a newer way, you know, maybe with a punk tinge, that's what the Jam would be. I don't know. What do you guys have to say about it? This album was one of the first Jam albums I ever heard. I think I was about 20 when I picked this up for the first time. And only having known their hits at that time, I was really excited to get into one of their LPs. And this one didn't disappoint. It's actually a really, really solid album with some really catchy hooks and lots of fun sing-along choruses and some great musicianship. I mean, the guitar, bass, and drums trio here, they click and gel with each other so perfectly. They were a very tight band. You know, and this being like their fourth or fifth album at this point really shows how their songwriting grew, their playing together grew, and growing as a band and as people had totally changed since their first album, where they were kind of more on an angry kind of vibe, you know, like this is the modern world kind of stuff. But, so let's get into it. The album opens with a song called Pretty Green. You know, it's a song about money. I mean, you know, it happens. But it's a good introduction because it opens up with that really heavy bass line. It's got those sharp guitar zaps. The drums have that really cool hi-hat thing going on the whole time. Then it kicks into the chorus and it sounds instantly like the Jam. They just have that sound. You know, that Jam sound. It's almost like, I don't know any other way to describe it besides it sounds like the Jam, you know. The second song is probably my favorite on this whole album. Well, give or take a couple songs. It's definitely one of my favorites, but Monday, the track Monday. I absolutely love this like melancholy rain cloud of a groove that this song has. Kind of like a Friday on My Mind vibe by the Easy Beats. I love the catchy repetition of it. I love the way it's got so much heartache involved and this like yearning hopefulness. And it really sounds like it could have been like a cool dance floor track. As far as an off-the-wall influence, maybe like in the drums or something, or maybe in like the, you know, you can't even say the lyrics. Oh, maybe the lyrics, but cool song. Really, really cool. I love the vibe on that song, and that's something I think that they were good at, was capturing moods, really. But I'm Different Now is the next song on this album, and really heavy guitars lead this one in. There's that charging hi-hat cymbal constantly going throughout. Really angular guitars pop up here and there, and very fast-paced vocals. So it's probably the closest to like a quote-unquote punk song on this album. Set the House Ablaze is pretty catchy. It's got a good like pop rock chorus and these really like dire sounding guitars that happen throughout. It's cool. The whistles that happen when they do the whistling sounds like a fire engine going to a fire, or this smoldering house is going up or something. The only problem I have with this song is I feel like it goes on forever. I feel like it just keeps going on and on. We kind of get the point after a while. But that's okay. Because then the next song you get is Start, which is, like I said, basically Taxman. I mean, that bass line, don't, dun, 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 it's kind of like Pump It Up by Elvis Costello, too. But I absolutely love that song. Very bright, very happy, very atmospheric of the jam. And the album version's cool because it's got the horns at the end of it going on, which is a fun little touch. But yeah, you get that very much Taxman and the guitars, but it works and they make it work, and that's kind of their vibe, was that mid '60s but now sound. So I can dig that. And then the side one ends with That's Entertainment, which is the acoustic track on here, which is just a phenomenal song about life, relationships, looking at the people around you, looking at little vignettes happening in your town. It's to me, it's like their Waterloo Sunset. It's kind of got that Ray Davies vibe, which I really, really enjoy. And they do an excellent job with it. There's such a cool, I keep using the word atmosphere and vibe, but like, they really do capture an essence. They capture a feeling. They capture a moment really, really well. That's kind of why I like bands like the Kinks, where they can take, one person and follow them through their day in a song, and you can relate to that. There's a moment in that line, feeding ducks in the pond and wishing you were far away. Anybody can relate to something like that. It's cool. It's not like it's trying to be something that it's not. It's a really honest song, and I think that's why I like that one a lot. Side 2 starts with Dreamtime. Really cool propulsive rhythms on this one. It barely takes a breath. I love just like that charging, unrelenting energy that powers this super uplifting track. Very fun to listen to and a great way to start off side 2. Man in the Corner Shop has this cool la 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 refrain, which again, very 60s influence, but works for them really well. Music for the last couple is a rare group song where they all wrote it together. Kind of a weird, like, ambient, quiet type of track, but I feel like it's the perfect build-up to Boy About Town, which for me is like classic Jam. A song like that doesn't get any more typical and instantly recognizable as Paul Weller and the Jam. And the album ends with Scrape Away, which is a very Revolver-like song to me. Not like my super favorite song on the album, but interesting nonetheless. I also really like the cover of this album, because apparently the cover is based off of British sound effects records that would have come out in the 70s. So they were going for something in that vibe. That word, it's the word of this video here. But this is cool. It's got the words, some pictures, and it's got a really nice shot of them glowing by a lake. And you got this cool label with pink on this side and then blue on this side. And this came out on Polydor in 1980. Overall, I have enjoyed this album for a long time, and it's probably my favorite. Like I said, there's a growth on this album that I feel like they started to hint at with Setting Suns, the album before this one. And the albums before that, like, In the City, This is the Modern World, All Mod Cons, those albums kind of set the blueprint of their sound. And then I feel like with this album, they were definitely going a little further out to expand on that, do something a little different. Like, I mean, I'll give songs credit like Set the House Ablaze or Scrape Away, in the sense that they get to experiment more. Their first couple albums are like very quick, very punchy, very abrasive, in-your-face type songs. These songs, I feel like, have a chance to breathe and grow a little bit, and can grow with the listener, which I think is important too, because sometimes when I hear the early Jam albums, as much as I love them, you kind of get the point. there's not a whole lot else you can dive into with some of those albums. They're fun, for sure. They're really great albums to listen to. But when you get to something like this, there's a little bit more going on, and that makes a more interesting listen. And their musicianship by this point had just grown in leaps and bounds. I mean, especially with a song like Start or That's Entertainment, Monday, Dreamtime, they really showed how much they grew, and we're going to continue to do with their next album, The Gift. But unfortunately, they didn't last much longer after this, like 2 or 3 years, and then they broke up, and Paul did the Style Council, which made some pretty good stuff too. But there's always going to be a soft spot in my heart for the Jam, and particularly this album, because this was the first one that got me into them when I was about 20. So definitely a nostalgic sense on this one for sure. But you know, I really do love this album, and I think if you're a fan of the Jam, if you're a fan of 70s light punk, like I think if you dig, you can't even compare it to like Ramones or Sex Pistols or Buzzcocks or any of those guys, like, because that's punk, you know. This isn't. This is its own thing. It's like a mod revival who happened to exist in the time of punk and disco and a really loose alternative rock that may have been going around at the time. And it's very much on its own. And that's kind of why I like Paul Weller, because he's always kind of done his own thing, but wearing his influences on his sleeve, which I think at times can be admirable, and I think it's needed in music sometimes when it's done right. And he has done that right a lot. And you know, the Style Council were a lot different, you know, much more poppy, you know, but still good stuff. Anyways, the Jam, Sound Effects. Let me know what you think about this album. Have you heard it, and what do you think about them? You know, do you have a different album that you prefer over this one? Let's hear it. I want to talk about the Jam for a while. So, thank you so much for watching. My name is Giggens. This has been Album Reviews with the Jam, Sound Effects, here on the Giggens channel on the YouTube. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. See you later.